I'm gonna save you some time. This is an incredible course. Spoiler alert, you knew it was gonna be great. So we're gonna talk about it and try to place you through some things. And I'm not gonna show you a speck of the actual content of the course, other than maybe glancing at the table of contents, because that's not my property. And if you wanna go check out the course, I'm gonna say right out of the gates, you gotta go to the source. And you gotta buy his course. I live in Nashville, so obviously I'm familiar with Guthrie. We've met a few times. And in fact, we're going to be working together in Scotland in this upcoming June. He's going to be teaching at this incredible once-in-a-lifetime clinic with Larry Carlton, Robin Ford, and I'll be there helping to host and sort of do what I can to help the event go well. So obviously, huge fan of Guthrie's playing, really excited to see him. Brett Papa does a great job with all the courses that he does. So high production value and high value. So I was just working through it today, and I wanted to walk through some of the things and the concepts and basically see if I can kind of try to learn by teaching what I'm taking from it. And there's a ton of stuff here. Some things you might expect, and then some nuggets that I want to share with you that were kind of an interesting twist or surprise, or actually kind of clarified what I've been seeing in Guthrie's playing for a while and explain some things. So one of the big things right out of the gate that Guthrie talks about is the three essential sounds. So right now we've got this kind of backdrop of G major, just sort of vamping. So that's one of the three sounds, is the major sound. It's built first from the chords, and I'm going to mess up the analogy, so I won't try to make the metaphor that you had with building the house. But essentially, you build the structure of a house with the thought of, like, you've got your harmony, you've got your chords, you've got your arpeggios that spell up from that. You've got your scales, and usually you start with pentatonic, by just adding a couple of notes to that arpeggio, the triad arpeggio. And then from that, you can easily get to the full scale of that sound, right? So when we build it from the ground up, it all kind of lands in place. And that's a lot of how I look at the guitar as well, too. There's so much on top of, the different floors of what's going on. If you were to see it from above, you got all these structures. You just got to be able to access them in real time. So we got some friends here watching live, and hopefully you got your guitars. And let's just go sort of break it down piece by piece. So if we were to start just with the major sound and look at building the arpeggio, it's built of just the three notes that make that chord: the 1, the major third, and the 5. And one of the big things that Guthrie stresses in this whole course is really setting yourself up with the right hand position. So we go over here. This structure right here, when you got that G bar chord based off of the 6th string, you're actually going to want to start off this arpeggio with your second finger right there. And that sets you up to grab that major third right there. That's the most comfortable spot to grab. So right there, those 3 notes get you those first 3 notes of the arpeggio. And then we're kind of back into the position of the top part of that bar chord. And you can slide up there because that third just sounds great. So it's kind of scooting. Sometimes you'll be scooting out of the position. You got to be able to come right back to it. So that's that major arpeggio, and everything's sort of based around G. It's just a nice, good chord and key and framework that sort of maps across the fretboard beautifully. But as with everything with guitar, you got to move it to all the different keys, move it around until you got it down. So we would just add, and you can try to tell me in the comments if you got it, we would add just 2 notes to this arpeggio. We've got the 1, the 3, and the 5 to get the major pentatonic. What would those notes be? I'll give you a second to think about it. I'll start playing them and then see if you can tell me just in terms of the numbers. So there's the 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1, 3. If we go 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 1. So we just add the 2 and the 6. And we're going to get into the different positions here using the good old cage system, which I agree that the cage system gets way overhyped. It's essentially just the 5 shapes that result from playing the different inversions, all that good stuff. So don't get too hung up on all the specifics, especially one thing he talks about that I really agree with is, like, some of these shapes that result from the cage system are just not that practical. And you're not going to end up holding that shape for my money. You wouldn't end up holding that. You'd be holding that piece of it. But then to get the full the sound with that major third, you're going to need, that's a really nice voicing there. I've overlooked it. I've used it in the past, but it's something I'm really going to try to focus on now because it gets that third. That third is in the bass, which is really cool. So that's that shape that kind of moves up here, what we, I guess, called the D shape, right? So we stay down here for a second and we look at what are the other two notes that we don't yet have if we want to build the full major scale. We've got the 1, 3, 5. We added the 2 and the 6. We've got that major pentatonic. We have 2 more notes that we're missing. I'll start playing them. So what 2 notes have I added? I added the 4 and the 7. There's a 7 and then the 4. So we can actually have a logical way and kind of a good excuse to go through each shape and get familiar with all of the notes that live there, starting from a chord shape. So there's that D shape we just looked at. Here's one that's going to be more familiar. It's going to be this C shape, right? So if we start from down on the 6th string, that's actually the 5th right there. So 5, 1, 3. If we think of that arpeggio first, we've got that bar chord. 5, 1, 3, 1, 3, 5, 3, 5, 1, 5, 1, 3, and then 5. And this is one thing that he brings up that is really cool, is just to notice these patterns. In that C shape, it's nothing but triads, proper triads. The proper triad is a 1, a 3, and a 5. If you have a 1, a 5, and a 1, we're missing the 3rd. We need that winning combination. So with this one right here, if we spell it out, we've got 5, 3, 1, and then stacked on top of each other in each of these shapes, you're going to want to break up these bar chords, all these different shapes of the cage, into 3-note groups, and so to check out what triads pop up. So there's a triad right there, a proper triad with a 1, a 3, and a 5. Same proper triad, right on down. I think it's the only shape, he says, that has like all 5 groupings, I guess, or 4, whatever it is. All the way through this shape, you're going to get a true triad. Whereas like in this D shape right there, that's like a power chord, right? So it's kind of cool, and it sort of explains why this is such a nice musical sounding spot right there. We also talk about in a little bit the G shape, which is sort of misunderstood. It's another one of those ones that's sort of weird to hold the whole thing. You probably would never do that, but it's really useful to grab all sorts of stuff, Hendrix triads and things like that. So we've got this C shape right here. The next one would be the A shape, up on the 10th fret in this case. And this would be another one where you want to, you'd hold the bar chord like that, but the moment that you go to play, at least for major, this arpeggio, you're going to want to set up your hand where the 2nd finger is right there. So that's an important thing that maybe people overlook. I see a lot of times people will try to Ollie's itching herself in the background. They try to slide their fingers around a lot, and they get a little bit caught, and sort of it'd be like being caught with the wrong footing if you're playing a sport. So when you set up with that 2nd finger there, you can grab that major 3rd. Remember, same with down here. Same type of thing. Now with each of these, there's going to be a major pentatonic. And then the full major scale. If we go up here to this G shape, it's crazy to sort of hold it. Nobody ever does this. Don't do it. But you are absolutely going to be holding. Let's go to this one right here. You're going to be holding pieces of it. So right there, that's a root, a 3rd, and a 5th. So that's a proper triad. And then there's another one right there, and then right on down there. You can also hold that right there, but that gives you a 5th and a root and a 5th, so that power chord. But it's super duper useful for the Hendrix fills, for the the Keith Richards stuff, and a great spot for the major scale. So that's like the major sound, and the homework would be go through each one of those 5 spots. Make sure that you can obviously play the bar chord shape there comfortably. And this would probably be the newest one to the party, is like getting that nice and comfortable. And then being able to spell the arpeggio. That might be a new piece of information. Right, that one's kind of awkward, but well worth it. Some of these you're going to use a lot more than others. And then finding the pentatonic. And the major, full major scale. Now let's switch to the minor. And there's some interesting stuff on this one as he gets into going through the same process. And these, remember, these are the 3 core structures. And remember also that no matter what, if you're interested in this, go to the source. Buy his course. He's working his butt off, making these videos for free every week, and I love sort of breaking them down, doing my best, and I bought it today. I have no affiliation other than that I'm a fellow East Nashvilleian, and just have been enjoying so much that I'm getting out of it. So this is all just stuff secondhand. I'm probably getting some things wrong. Make sure you go figure it out from Guthrie himself. So we got this G minor now. Start with a classic minor bar chord, and then the arpeggio is going to be 1, 3, 5, and the positioning for this one is going to be a lot easier to do that minor third right there with the pinky. So it looks a little different than the positioning for the major. So 1, 3, 5, and then we're back into that 1, 3, 5, and then 1, 3. So if you've never done these like chords when you spread them out, they're really satisfying, and they might have some tricky bits to them that you have to get comfortable with playing 2 notes on a string, like there, and then the rest of it might look like a bar chord, and then you have to get ready to stick the landing there, right? Let's see, boom, boom, boom. Oh yeah, boom. That's sort of a squirrely one, that one in between there. So we've got that minor third down there, and then that really nice shape there. One of the things that was really cool to notice, and I've heard this in his playing, is that when he goes to play this, the scale, so we've got the minor pentatonic, that'd be the next thing. That's our good old-fashioned friend there, the box one, right? Minor, arpeggio, minor pentatonic. And then the major scale that he likes to use, see if you can tell me what note is omitted from it. I've got a, oh wait, sorry, no, it'll go like this. It'd be, so keep track of these notes. We got, so it omits one note from the full 7-note, like natural minor, Aeolian, whatever. There's a cool way that Guthrie uses modes, and I don't care about modes and what they're called, but he uses them without needing to call them blah, 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 mixolydian and all that. He refers to, when we get into the dominant 7, he refers to the dominant 7 scale as that, as the dominant 7 scale, which I think is great because that is reflected in his playing. When there's a dominant 7 chord, he'll just go into that tonality, hit the chord tones and hit scale tones that work with that dominant 7 without getting caught up in thinking, you know, and he even addresses it when he gets into talking about going between a 1 chord and a 5 chord, that like technically when you're playing a G major scale over a D7, you're playing the D dominant 7 scale, all that, but just getting that clutter out of your brain so that really you can just stick with one scale, stick with one pattern, and then focus on listening as you play. So with that in mind, like this little moment here where there isn't this note right here, yeah, there isn't a D sharp, correct, yeah. So there isn't a flat 6 or even a major 6, which would be like the sort of, that sort of Dorian sound, whatever that might be, and I'm familiar with that, but I like this sort of lean and mean. It creates some just really nice flowing sort of sounds. This is the one I'm less familiar with. Yeah, I gotta get that second degrees. Isn't that nice and kind of boom, boom, da, boom. Such a nice sort of like slinky sound. It's really like lean and it moves really well. And it almost sounds like you're spelling out an arpeggio because it's just sort of nice and minimal, which I just dig. I dig that sound. It's cool to understand that's kind of how his brain sees those that sound. If we get now into the dominant 7, let's check this out. So again, we're hovering on G, and I'm not playing through every single shape probably because I need to practice on them, but you get the idea that you would take this through each of the 5 shapes, each of these 3 essential sounds. You'd have so much covered, and you just got to take your time with it and get it so you can move it to different keys. Easier said than done, I get it, but it's not a complete guessing game. There is a pattern to this stuff. In fact, it's all patterns. That's what it is. So we got this G7, right? Starting just with that G7 bar chord. Start by arpeggiating it. So now this is a chord that's going to have 4 notes. The minor is just 1 flat 3 5. The major is 1 major 3 5. Now we've got a 4-note chord. So we've got, but to spell out this arpeggio, it's going to start off looking just like that major one because it has a major third, 1, 3, and in fact the 5. It's all the same, but now we got to add that 4th note, which is going to be the flat 7. That one's got some sort of tricky fingering I'm trying to get used to. We go up to the C shape. And then we bring in, and here's the catch. I was about to say if we bring in the pentatonic, there is no pentatonic that matches the dominant 7 chord because the dominant 7 needs that flat 7. That doesn't occur in one pentatonic shape, right? I mean, because if we have the major, we have some notes and not the others. If we have the minor, we have some notes and not the others. So instead, if we just skip over that portion of the recipe and go straight to the dominant 7th scale, which doesn't matter. If I say, technically speaking, it's a mode, I don't care. I like thinking of it this way too. And in fact, anytime I'm stuck with trying to teach modes, this is effectively how I teach it. It was like, think of G as your key center, as your tone, as your like, we're not in a song, we're not necessarily in a key, even though we're kind of vamping in a 1 chord vamp in G. But we're just floating on a G7 sound. So if I want to play a full scale on that, I'm going to take that G major scale that we were playing earlier, and I'm just going to flat the 7. I'm changing one note, but it's a big difference that it makes. So we go back down here. Instead of doing that major 7, that wouldn't work, right? So that makes total sense if we come from that that understanding that we've just played. Right? Now we're just kind of filling in the blanks, but we ought to keep that flat 7. It's fun stuff, and I'm kind of cherry picking. I'm going to the places that I feel a little more comfortable. But that's the whole idea, is that it's showing me there's spots like, all right, I gotta like tighten up my game in some of these areas that have the full thing. Because if I have all 5 of these shapes equally strong, it's gonna be a good time, an even more good time. Okay, I just started looking at the concepts. I made some notes here, and I'm not by a long shot am I gonna be able to cover all the concepts that he covers. And this is all just coming from the, like essentially like the introduction. I'll show you just kind of like the screenshot that y'all can check out. And just like the actual, that's good. That's proof that I purchased it. They're saying like, hey, you've already purchased this. Like, yeah, as long as I don't show my credit card number, that's fine. But like the table of contents and stuff here, I'm just kind of getting through the first part of it. There's tons of really nice musical examples, song snippets, and the whole deal. Obviously, I don't have to say, I don't have any affiliation other than that. I'm just trying to learn this stuff just like y'all. So you could consider this, maybe there'll be a part 2, but I'm just kind of getting my feet wet with the concepts and trying to learn by teaching, right? But some of the other concepts that he talks about that are really important are that chords and lead are so connected. Like, don't think that the chords and the harmony and lead playing, sure, they might be separate, like parts of your brain, parts of the song, but the primordial ooze and all of the sort of foundation that the chords and the harmonies start with, that's where the chord tones, and that's where you're going to sound great. Like you know where you're going and like you know what you're doing. I'll stop the track real quick and show this trick that what does he call it? The triad trick. No, the triad trick is very simply like how to spell triad. So if we take let's take C, for example, the C triad, we'll switch out of that G soup that we were in for a while. We've got this C right here, and you can see the C from that bar chord shape right there. So who can tell me, all right, class, who can tell me what would I do to this C major? What's the only thing I need to do to it to turn it into a C minor? And be as specific as you can be. Because this is really important. This shape, wherever I see it, wherever it is on the neck, whether it was any one of these major triads, in order to make it minor, all I have to do is make the major third a minor third. So that means I got to know which one of these notes is a major third. How many of you have overlooked that? So you just got to be able to see that and change that one note. Really important. So there's that major third right there on the second string. Okay, so if I need to make this a major 7, I can do that with 3 notes. Okay, so obviously a major 7, minor 7, these are 4-note chords, but I can take the essentials. I don't always need a root every single time or a fifth every single time. The most critical tones to get the sound of a chord are the 3 and the 7. You know, making sure the 3 is a major 3rd, minor 3rd, major 7, minor 7, or what we call flat 7. So there's that regular triad. If I want to make this a major 7, I just got to lower that root by 1 fret. You know, we know the sound. We would keep going and make that a flat 7, which turns that into a dominant 7. Great little 3-note voicing for that, right? Same thing up here when we go to the minor. That minor 7 is just going to be a combination of the minor 3rd and the flat 7. So just being able to carry that knowledge and just remember to run it through each one of these triads. So here we got another version of C up here. We got, if I need to make this minor, I got to know where that 3rd is. You got to have that awareness. If I want to make this a flat 7, this will look different than what we had over there. So finding those formulas for each one of these regular triads to turn them into some really cool 3-note versions of dominant 7 and a major 7 and all that kind of good stuff. The trick that he has for taking, and I love this. This is something that was really new to me, and just I'm totally going to be taking my time with it and working on it. It's a phrasing trick, and let's take just an open G. Okay, so a way to target the chord tones, that's what we're talking about here, is being aware of what these chords are made of and where the 3rd is, where the 5th is, so that's not just like any note will do. That's we're evolving past that phase, right? If you're just playing a bar chord, you're like, well, that's a G, that's all I know about it. But now we're breaking it up into its little pieces and knowing that if this is the 3rd, I want to go from the 1 up to the 3, 1, and we're connecting it with tones that come from that scale. So if I have that G with the G major scale, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and then from there I'm going to go 3, 4, 5. So you see that each time it's just a little 3-note phrase, but I'm just leapfrogging from a chord tone, 1, up to 3, using the 2. So 1, da, 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 da. And then here's the exception. I go, again, just with 3 notes, I go 5, 6, 1. So we don't use the major 7 in this pattern, because if we landed on the major 7, we wouldn't be landing on a chord tone. So it ends up sounding just like a nice, pleasing, like, boom, da, 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 boom, da, ba, boom, da, right? And each time I stop in one of those 3-note phrases, I'm hitting chord tones. So boom, da, boom, da, boom, da, boom, da, da, da. So each one of those sounds much more intentional than if I just went, I don't know, like if I went like, I'm so into that pattern now, I like it too much, but boom, 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 that's sort of hanging out in between. Boom, boom, boom. That's in the scale, but it sounds unresolved. So if you took that, and you should, through each one of these scale positions, again, I'm going to skip over the one in D because I'm still working on that, but like we've got this one right here, up on C, the C shape of G. If we went like, and again, trying to start on the lowest note that you have available, right? So that's the 3rd, and this is going to be cool as you work on this to start to understand that here's my regular chord shape, but these notes below it are part of that chord. That's a 1, that's a 5, that's a 3, and that's really nice. So that's 3, 4, 5, and then we go 5, 6, 1. Boom, 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 boom. And these are just really nice musical ways to work through a combination. You see how when we're doing these things, these essentially create like, it's a nice hybrid of like, it's sort of a scale, it's sort of an arpeggio, it's sort of a lick, it's sort of a phrase, and we all want to sound like we know where we're going. This is how you start to target the chord tones, by trusting the pattern. And then your ear will just start to hear like, oh yeah. It's like, yeah, okay, I could sort of stop there, but what if I your ear will be driven more towards like the resolution that you're digging. Let's see, what are some other notes I had in here? I'm going to look at the comments too. I can't quite catch up. Appreciate you guys being here, and of course, all props go to Mr. Guthrie Trapp and Brett Papa. I'm just doing my thing. I enjoy playing and just trying to learn by teaching. The last thing I'll talk about is, and again, this is not by any means the full scope of the course. Definitely go check out the whole thing. but I think we all have heard Guthrie playing really, really tasty stuff where it's going between the 1 and the 5. So here I'm just going between a G and a D7, and it's a really nice, like a nice way to emphasize the full range of the major scale. So if I just go with arpeggios, it spells out these beautiful tensions that we might be overlooking most often. We might just sort of be playing major pentatonic and just kind of like cruising through and hoping that like we just sort of get in the ballpark. And this is a great way to sort of discover like what you can really do when you play that F sharp in G, because it sits right there in that D major, but it's really a D7. And this is where if you practice these shapes in all the different keys, I know that's like a lot, but if you just gradually go through them all, let's say you spend a whole day working on the D, all the D shapes, the D major, the D minor, and then you got through the D7. Then when you got to this context where you're playing a G to a D7, you could confidently be playing the D dominant 7 scale as the way that Guthrie looks at it. And you would, without having to calculate, geometry or math or whatever with modes, you would be playing in the correct mode. And it turns out you're just playing a G major scale, but with all of that intention to aim at all the great tones that make a D7 sound like a D7. So let's jam on that a little bit. Let me see if there's any other notes. Yeah. And one thing that he makes clear that I think is like really cool is that, we get sometimes confused with, like, let's say if a song is like an A7, like it's a blues, right? We get sort of thrown off by the word dominant because the dominant 5 chord, the dominant 7 chord, that comes from the tradition of, harmony in classical music, where in a typical major scale, like if we're in A major, bum, 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 that 5 chord is the dominant, chord degree of this scale. And we make that an E7 because those are the notes that come from that A major scale. They spell out an E7. But if we're playing a song that's based in A and it happens to be A7, that doesn't not necessarily mean that is a dominant like 5 chord. It's working as a dominant 7 chord, and you can definitely play, and you should play those scale tones and chord tones that work with it. But you don't need to be thinking of this as functioning as a 5, because we're going to be hanging out on that. It's really only the actual 5 chord, in that case, the E, that would be functioning in that sort of more classic sense of the term. All right, so let's jam on this a little bit, and then we'll bounce out. I've got a workout to do with my members. I'm going to be going live in a little bit. I told them that'd be a little bit late. Some of them are here, of course. Okay, so this is going back and forth between a G major and then a D7. It's a perfect case to use, let's say, like a G major arpeggio, and then work on the dominant 7. And one thing that he does that's really cool, I'll stop the track for a second, is that he shows that if we have like these are just really simply tones from a G major scale. So G, so I'm just going back and forth between a G and a D. And if I go to, like, watch this, I'll go to a chord tone G. If I go down a half step, that's the F sharp, that's a chord tone for D. If I go up to that's the 3rd of G, then that's the 5th of D. So over and over again, I'm hitting these chord tone on G, and I'm just staying within the G major scale. That's a chord tone of D, that's that flat 7, and then we got, obviously the D would also be a chord tone for D. So you're basically, by playing that major scale, you've got all these opportunities to introduce that beautiful tension and release. So let's try it a little bit. Triad. Still getting better at that one. Let's try that again. So. I got that wrong, I think. Oh, there it is. Yeah, okay. Isn't that great, that little shape right there? So there's that triad. Just looking at the differences right there and noticing how cool that is to have that side by side. and so on and so forth. We jammed, we noodled, we laughed, we cried, and I'm just getting started. So maybe I'll report back to you with my progress with this course. And yes, of course, if you're interested in more, go to the source, buy his course. If you want to learn guitar with me, we do a 14-day free trial. I have incredible members. You will be welcomed in style. I'm rhyming tonight. But yeah, it's incredible to me when new people come in, they get welcomed by other new members who have only been with us for like a few days. And then they become the welcoming committee. And I show up usually like as soon as I can, but there's a lot of enthusiasm because we do a lot of this. We do live streams together and we share clips of our playing. And to me, that's the secret sauce to make it a little bit nerve-wracking to post a video of yourself, but then it's nothing but love, and we always make more progress when we do that. Lastly, in the links in the description, you'll find info about that Scotland retreat. It's incredible, once in a lifetime. Robin Ford, Larry Carlton, Guthrie Trapp, Mary Spender, Robbie McIntosh. I'll be there. If that's a plus or a minus, I don't know. And again, check out this amazing new course from Guthrie, and we'll see you guys all too soon. All right. Rock and roll.